The quiet owner of the second-hand bookstore sat in his usual corner, just like every other day. No one knew that 30 years ago, he was the man who changed the world with a single bullet from 1.8 kilometers away. Until that day when an old photograph fell from between the books. Welcome to the Real Life Stories. Before we begin this emotional story of silence, skill, and hidden legends, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us grow. We're expanding every day, and I sincerely thank you for being part of it. The Old Pages bookstore sat tucked away in one of Nashville's quietest corners on Meridian Street between a family-owned coffee shop and a vintage clothing store. This narrow, two-story establishment had become home to thousands of second-hand books, their worn spines creating walls of accumulated knowledge. From the outside, weathered red brick and a simple hand-painted wooden sign made it appear no different from other antique shops in Nashville's historic district. But those who stepped inside discovered something extraordinary. Shelves organized with military precision, every volume in its designated place, maintained with obsessive attention to detail. Thomas Everett was 72 years old, with silver gray hair always perfectly combed and a lean frame that still carried itself with unmistakable military bearing. He dressed in pressed khakis and button-down shirts that never showed a wrinkle, his movements economical and purposeful. Customers knew him only as a knowledgeable bookseller who arrived each morning at exactly 7 a.m. and stayed until 8 p.m. 6 days a week. Never married, no children, no family that anyone knew of. At least, that's what everyone believed. He'd purchased a bookstore 15 years earlier with cash, moving to Nashville from somewhere down south. No one was quite sure where, and Thomas never offered details beyond vague references to military service and time overseas. He was friendly but private, helpful but distant. The kind of man who remembered your name after meeting you once, who knew your reading preferences, but never shared anything personal about himself. The most special section was the military history collection in the back corner, positioned next to a comfortable leather reading chair and a small table where Thomas kept coffee brewing throughout the day. Vietnam War, Gulf War, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq. Books detailing every conflict were arranged in perfect chronological order. The collection was sophisticated, far more comprehensive than you'd expect in a small independent bookstore. Rare first editions sat beside dog-eared paperbacks. Official military history shared shelf space with personal memoirs and declassified documents. But among these books, carefully hidden behind a false panel, was a special section that told a story Thomas had never spoken aloud. That Monday morning in October started like any other. The Tennessee autumn had painted the trees in brilliant oranges and reds. Thomas was placing a new shipment of military books on their designated shelves, each movement deliberate and practiced. His weathered hands handled each book like a precious artifact. At exactly 10:30 a.m., the brass door chime rang. Thomas looked up to see a young man entering, and immediately as trained, I began automatic assessment. About 25 to 26 years old, 6 feet tall, athletic build concealed beneath civilian clothes that were too neat for a regular customer. Short hair cut with military precision, posture that screamed special operations, shoulders back, head up, eyes constantly scanning. The way he moved through narrow aisles, automatically checking corners and exits. A small scar above his left eyebrow, suggesting combat training. Thomas recognized this type immediately. They came occasionally. Active duty military, veterans adjusting to civilian life, researchers studying conflicts they'd lived through. They were drawn to his military section like moths to flame. "Good morning," said the young man, his voice carrying crisp military diction. "Do you have a military history section?" Thomas offered genuine smile. "In the back corner. Any specific period you're interested in. Special Forces operations. 1980 to 2000 time frame. Particularly sniper operations and long-range reconnaissance." Thomas felt familiar tightness in his chest. "You'll find an extensive collection on that shelf. Third row has technical manuals. Fourth row has mission records. The young man extended his hand. David Martinez. I appreciate the detailed organization. Thomas Everett. Organization is respect the men who live these stories. David's handshake was firm, brief, professional. Thomas guided him to the military section and returned his work. But something about this visitor had captured his attention. David spent the first hour methodically examining books. Covert Operations, SEAL Team 6, Advanced Sniper Manual. Each selection revealed sophisticated understanding of special operations literature. He opened each book carefully, scanning contents with trained efficiency. Then he stopped, holding an old sniper manual that Thomas had acquired from a retiring Fort Benning instructor. The book was worn from extensive use, pages yellowed from countless readings. Thomas watched as David's expression changed, becoming more focused, more concerned. Thomas's heart began racing. That particular manual was special, not because of content, but because of its history. Very few copies existed outside classified military facilities, and this one had belonged to someone Thomas knew very well. Mr. Everett. David called out, surprise in his voice. Where did you acquire this manual? Thomas approached, maintaining casual demeanor. Estate sale a few years back. Old military instructor. Retired to Florida. Why? David examined the cover carefully. This isn't commercial. This is FM 23 to 10 supplement, Advanced Sniper Protocols. Only distributed to qualified military snipers and approved training facilities. Is that unusual? Very unusual. I've only seen this during advanced training at Quantico. David opened the book, examining margins where someone had made detailed handwritten notes. The person who owned this wasn't just reading about sniping. They were annotating from field experience. Thomas kept his voice neutral. Military men are thorough. They like to make notes. David continued reading, catching details that would escape civilian notice. The margin notes weren't academic observations. They were practical corrections made by someone who had applied these techniques in combat. Calculations for wind drift at extreme distances. Environmental factors not covered in standard text. These annotations, David said slowly, were written by someone with extensive field experience. Someone correcting the manual based on actual combat applications. For the next 2 hours, David remained in the military section, but kept returning to that manual. Something fascinated him. The way certain pages showed more where specific techniques highlighted and cross-referenced. This had belonged to a true professional. Around 3 p.m., as David examined Black Hawk Down, something unexpected happened. A loose photograph fell from between pages, fluttering the floor and landing face up. David bent to retrieve what he expected would be a bookmark. What he saw instead made him freeze completely. The photograph was black and white, clearly from the 1990s. It showed a man in desert camouflage holding a Barrett M82 sniper rifle, standing on what appeared to be a rooftop in urban combat environment. The background suggested Middle Eastern architecture, flat-roof buildings, narrow streets, harsh desert shadows. The man's face was partially obscured by tactical face paint, but his eyes were clearly visible. Intense, focused, alert, the eyes of a predator. The rifle was positioned with professional competence. This wasn't training or pose shot. This was documentation of active deployment, probably taken during actual operations. David studied the photograph carefully. Despite camouflage paint and 30 years of aging, the features were unmistakable. It was Thomas. David looked at the photograph, then at Thomas, then back. His mind raced through implications. The sniper manual with professional annotations. The comprehensive military collection. The way Thomas moved with precision. His careful answers about the manual's origin. Thomas noticed David's stillness and approached. When he saw what David was holding, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition that a carefully maintained secret had been exposed. I believe that belongs to the book, Thomas said quietly, extending his hand. David looked up. This is you, isn't it? Thomas took the photograph, studying it as if seeing it for the first time in years. Sometimes old things get mixed up with new things. Mr. Everett, David said, military training telling him pursue this, but instincts warning him he was treading on sacred ground. What unit were you with? Thomas paused. The store was silent, except for ticking of an antique clock. That was a long time ago, son. The rifle in that photograph, that's a Barrett M82A1. And your positioning, that's not training. That's operational deployment. Thomas walked to the front, checked no other customers were present, and turned the sign to close before locking the door. Some conversations require privacy. David followed him to the back, where Thomas opened a hidden cabinet. Inside, David saw a collection that made his breath catch. More photographs, military documents with classification stamps, citations, and commendations. A bronze star with V device, mounted in a simple frame. Below it, a citation. Staff Sergeant Thomas J. Everett, United States Army, 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. For extraordinary heroism during combat operations in Mogadishu, Somalia, October 3rd to 4th, 1993. Somalia, David whispered. 1993, you were there? Thomas nodded slowly. I was there. David continued reading. For gallantry during the Battle of Mogadishu, Staff Sergeant Everett, serving as unit sniper, engaged hostile forces at extreme range, neutralizing multiple targets and enabling successful extraction of wounded personnel. His actions saved the lives of 18 American soldiers, 18 men who had families waiting, Thomas corrected softly. The number isn't what matters. That they made it home matters. David set the citation down carefully. Every special operations soldier knew about Mogadishu. The battle was legendary. A mission gone wrong that became a story of extraordinary heroism. The 1.8-kilometer shot that broke the world record. That was you. Thomas didn't confirm directly. Distance is mathematics. Purpose makes a shot matter. For the next 3 hours, as afternoon light faded, David listened as Thomas shared fragments of his story. Not classified details, but human elements. The weight of responsibility as unit marksman. Sleepless nights before missions, knowing others' lives depended on his precision. The transition from military to civilian life. Finding meaning in ordinary tasks after years where every action had life or death consequences. Why didn't you stay in? David asked. Thomas looked at his weathered hands. Because there comes a time when you've given enough. When you need peace in ordinary things. Books don't shoot back. Stories don't create widows. David understood. The transition was something every veteran struggled with. But for special operations soldiers who had lived at the edge of human capability, the challenge was magnified. Does anyone else know? You're the first person in 30 years to ask the right questions. As David prepared to leave, Thomas handed him the sniper manual along with 2 other technical manuals. I can't accept these. You're not accepting them. You're continuing them. Those books taught me precision under pressure. Maybe they can teach you purpose beyond the mission. After David left, Thomas returned to organizing, but something had changed. For the first time in years, someone knew his story. A week later, David returned with 3 other young SEALs. Word had spread quietly through the community. The bookstore owner wasn't just any veteran. He was living history. But Thomas didn't change his routine. He still organized with same precision, still helped customers, still maintained quiet dignity. The only difference was that occasionally, young warriors would sit in the back corner, listening to wisdom that couldn't be found in manuals. Some heroes were medals on their chest. Others were silence in their hearts. Thomas Everett chose a harder path, living quietly with extraordinary memories, finding peace in ordinary moments, teaching through presence rather than words. He didn't need recognition or applause. He had something more valuable, knowledge that 18 families went home intact because of decisions he made 30 years ago in a desert city. His bookstore had become a bridge between generations of warriors, where lessons of the past could guide heroes of the future. That's true heroism. Not the moment when the world watches, but what you do when no one's looking. It's finding purpose in peace, strength in silence, meaning in helping others discover stories that matter. Have you ever met someone like Thomas? Someone who seemed ordinary until you discovered they were anything but? Share their story in the comments. At the Real Life Stories, we believe the most powerful stories whisper. They wait for someone wise enough to listen. Someone who understands that the greatest warriors are often the ones we never notice. If this moved you, subscribe to the Human Stories. Help us remember that heroes walk among us every day, living quietly, serving still, carrying their service with the same dignity they once carried their weapons.